You've called out troops to prevent a handful of Negro children from integration.
Because the best way to prevent the violence was to remove the cause.
Governor, what's your opinion of the crowds of white adults? They curse at any Negro who happens to pass by. They call Negroes animals.
You can't change the hearts of people by law.
There are many faces in the civil rights era, and one of the most seen faces is this one. Studied around the world, his face appears next to the great champions of the civil rights era, like Martin Luther King. Orval Faubus, whose name I keep wanting to say is Orval Faubus, is one of the weirder characters in the civil rights story. He's seen as a bit of an outsider by these guys.
I live to be bad!
And the thing that he is the most remembered for is this.
This is Central High School, Little Rock, Arkansas. Troops, which for nearly 3 weeks lined the sidewalk here in front of the high school, under orders to keep the colored students out. Just got a report here on this end that the students are in.
Do you feel it's worth it going through this?
Yes, I do.
Awful Foreskin is seen as one of the villains of the civil rights era, but it's a bit more complicated than that. So let's get started and talk about what made Orval Faubus Orval Faubus. Orval Faubus was a native of Arkansas, and the beginning of his life makes you think that he's going to be on the left side of politics. His father was an avid socialist, and he attended the Commonwealth College, which had several notable communists in it. Like many in his generation, Faubus served in the military in World War II, joined the army, and when he came back, he got involved in Veterans Affairs, which put him on a path into politics. Faubus ran in the 1954 Arkansas gubernatorial election to replace a very unpopular Francis Cherry. The election was apparently quite brutal, and Faubus was accused of being a communist because of his communist school and his communist father and his communist past. And he largely brushed that stuff off, because luckily for Faubus, everyone was kind of tired of the Red Scare politics. And so accusing someone of being a communist didn't quite have the sting it used to have. Faubus would end up winning the election with 67% of the vote. But Faubus's entry into politics would have a huge effect on the way that he saw the political world. He replaced a governor who had lost all of the political support, and being accused of communism made him realize that he was going to need to lean towards the right. But he wasn't necessarily a racist piece of shit. In 1956, in the second year of his gubernatorial term, he would support 6 African Americans to the Democratic State Committee, and Arkansanians didn't like his liberal views on race. What is the pronoun of a person from Arkansas? This is right at the very beginning of the peak of the civil rights movement. Brown v. Board had just been passed in 1954, and so he had opportunities to really be progressive. And so what he did was say, fuck you. When the Brown v. Board decision was handed down, all schools in the US had to integrate. There could be no segregated education. Faubus had become incredibly unpopular because of his liberal views on race. And so he seized this opportunity to show everyone that no, he was racist, and he was going to stand up to the federal government and show them how Arkansas fights back. A school in Arkansas had been selected to sort of test this Brown v. Board thing, because what's the point in changing the law if no one ends up changing their policies? 9 African American students were selected to go to Little Rock School in Arkansas. Orval Faubus heard this was happening, and he deployed the National Guard. He needed to stop these students before the unrest got out of hand. By the way, imagine being this woman, and for the rest of history, everyone looks at you and goes, wow, what a racist piece of garbage. Look at that face. Orval Faubus would send in the National Guard, and he would manage to keep the students from entering Little Rock High School for 20 whole days. As what happens in the rest of the civil rights story, the National Guard is federalized and federal troops come in and keep the protesters safe. And in this case, they sent in the 101st Airborne. Like, what are you going to do about that? Orval Faubus ends up losing this particular battle, but he still stays as the governor. In total, he stays in for 12 years, from 1955 to 1967. history really hasn't been kind to Orval. He's seen as like the opening boss to the civil rights fight, right? The one that gets defeated really easily, and then there's George Wallace and Bull Connor. And so he's usually seen as this fence-sitting politician who's kind of hedging his bets, or at the very worst, just an incompetent villain of the civil rights era. I have a bit of a complicated view of Faubus. I don't think it was all good. I don't think it was all bad. I see Faubus as a reformer who knows the people who voted for him, and he knows his state. He's also a man who's keenly aware of how tenuous his position is, and if he wants anything meaningful to happen, then he's going to need to be in for more than a 2-year period of time. And even though we mainly know Orval Faubus as the man who tried to stop integration, he still ends his final election with 84% of the black vote. And throughout his term as governor, he does a lot to try and relieve the situation of African Americans. He extends funding to historically black learning institutions. He hires more black people into public office, and he gets rid of the race-biased poll tax. The problem for Faubus was that he was a reformist in a time of revolution. He wanted to make incremental change when the world was changing so rapidly around him. Orval Faubus ran for election 3 more times, but ultimately he failed. The world had just sort of passed him by. His part of the politics had been played out. And as he got older, he became a lot more conservative, and so he started supporting Republican candidates. But he always claimed he never voted Republican. I think history has been unkind to Faubus. He was a man who wanted to do right by African Americans. And in an alternate history, he is a one-term governor who threw his support behind the civil rights cause. Instead, we end up with a bitter Faubus who, from my perspective, is one of the more complicated and misunderstood characters in the civil rights story. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you did, chuck a comment, chuck a subscription, and throw me a like. Anyway, thank you for dropping by, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.